This episode of GatherGeeks is sponsored by Leo Events. The impact of live events is undeniable, but for now, the destination is digital. While Leo Events can plan and produce virtual events alongside any credible platform provider, the agency developed an exclusive proprietary platform that is proven, customizable, and ready to deploy. Learn more at leoevents.com.
Are you a follower?
9, 8,
Okay, so we're gonna probably add.
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here's your host, BizBash chairman and founder, David Adler.
Today we are going to delve into one of the most passionate types of events on the planet, high-end wine tastings. Our guest is Daniel Jonas, the proprietor of Paulée de New York, the 2-decade-old springtime week-long wine event which promotes wines and winemakers of Burgundy through a series of specialized seminars, tastings, and gala dinners. Paulée has been described as the world's greatest wine event. At its gala, more than 600 attendees share their favorite Burgundy wines at ticket prices that could get as high as $10,000. Other events are designed to attract younger wine aficionados in a conscious effort to make the love of wine more accessible. Its pivot to virtual, while serving its purpose, has definitely heightened the desire to return to face-to-face. According to Daniel, though, some aspects of the virtual event will become staples. To help with the interview today, I am joined by my friend Christian Connor, who is a writer and a wine aficionado. In fact, during the pandemic, we took a sommelier class together and used the time to really understand the incredible story about wine and how it intersects with history, geography, horticulture, culinary arts, fine craftsmanship, and fun. Let's take a listen.
What does the weekend normally look like, and what does it look like? Like, how many events are there? How many people are in attendance normally? To give a bigger picture of what New York is like during this festival.
The first one we did 20 years ago was just one day. It was a tasting in the afternoon and then a gala dinner seated at night. But it's grown over the years. We've extended it by adding on different types of tastings, educational seminars, because I want education to be a part of this for people to understand. We've had geologists come and talk about the different terroir of Burgundy. So we keep adding on events, focused tastings on specific domains like Romanée-Conti or Rouleau or something like that. We even had Jean-Marc Rouleau, who's an actor and who wrote a play, perform his play. And his play talks about wine, and it was absolutely spectacular because this comes back to what I said turned me on, lit that bulb in the first place, is that there's a much bigger picture to understand in wine than just the descriptors and the grape varieties. You have Jean-Marc Rouleau, one of the greatest white winemakers in the world, who's also an artist and an actor. And to see his art performing, somehow it translates into his wine and you have a deeper appreciation. So I love it so much.
So yeah. How long? Go show us the whole weekend. How many events are there?
Okay, normally we start on a Wednesday. And on a Wednesday, we may do the off-grid, kind of the lesser-known wines, and that's very affordable. And then on a Thursday, we'll do 2 events. We'll do a lunch focused on 1 or 2 domains, and then we'll do a dinner. These are collectors' lunches and special rare wine dinners. And then Friday, we have what we call the verticals tasting. The verticals tasting is a tasting where each domain participating brings 3 vintages, a vertical tasting of 1 appellation. That'll be during the day. It's fascinating. People think that's the best event of the week. And then that night, we'll do what we call the rare wine dinner, which is really special, Romanée-Conti with some very old wines, and it's a very expensive dinner. And then Saturday, we have the grand tasting, which is the current vintage, like 4 different appellations from this year, 2018 vintage. And then we'll do the gala dinner that night. And then Sunday, there are no consumer events, but sometimes consumers find out where we are and they show up. But I'll take them to hear gospel music or barbecue, or I'll take them to Chinatown, all the winemakers. Or I usually take them on a bike ride around Central Park or Prospect Park or around New York City, so they get a little taste of the city and some fresh air after a long night. And then we get them on a plane and I unplug my phone and say goodbye.
How many people are participating in the entire event?
Yeah, so the largest event is the grand tasting. on Saturday afternoon. That's about 600 people. The smallest event would be the rare wine dinner for maybe between 24 and 36 people at $10,000 per person. But maybe 10,000, maybe 8,000, but it's not an expensive dinner. The other tastings, generally between 200 and 400 people. I think that we probably see about 1,500 people over the weekend because there are a number of people who do multiple events. This event really started when I joined restaurant Montrachet with Drew Nieperent in 1985. The restaurant opened in Trebek in 1985. And of course, with a name like Montrachet, it has some good Burgundies on the list. At the time, I was just learning about wine. We very quickly got a 3-star review in the New York Times. I had lived in France. I had studied wine. I had lived in wine regions, worked at wineries. So I knew a little something about wine. And after we got this review, Drew was overwhelmed. We had a very skeleton staff there to begin with. And he asked if I would jump in and help with the wine ordering and inventory and all that. And that was the beginning of my career in wine, really. Now, since I had that opportunity, I started to build the wine list at the restaurant. And it was also a time when in Burgundy, there were a lot of changes taking place with the new generation taking over, all kinds of interest in the vineyards, in organic farming. And I would go to France quite regularly and meet this young generation of winemakers. And so I decided that why not invite them to New York and do a wine dinner with us? That's how it all started. I invited individuals, Jean-Pierre de Smet from Domaine de l'Arlot, Jacques Sayes from Domaine Dujac, Christophe Roumier, Patrick Bies, Dominique Lafont, and Etienne Griveau. And it was just a small group who I became very close with. And I invited them to New York as individuals. We do a wine dinner. And as time marched on, they became more famous and busier and solicited all over the world and said to me, Daniel, if we're going to come to New York, why don't we do something a little bit bigger, something more of a wine festival? So it was a collaboration and the seed was planted. At the same time, Dominique Lafont, whose great-grandfather started La Paulée de Meursault, invited me to La Paulée de Meursault. And it was at that moment that I had an epiphany moment being at La Paulée de Meursault and saying, this is exactly how I feel wine should be expressed and shared. And maybe I can try to do some kind of an event like this in the United States.
What about that event that made the light bulb go off? What did you say?
Right. God. Okay. Good question, because what it was and is today is a Paulée. The name Paulée really represents an end of harvest celebration. Now, every domain in Burgundy has this at the end of their harvest, their own harvest. But the great-grandfather of Dominique, Jules Lafont, decided that he was going to help promote Burgundy wines. This is the 20s, so the times weren't as good as they are today. Let's help promote Burgundy wines and shed a spotlight on the village of Meursault. Why don't we invite the whole village to a location and we'll celebrate the Paulée together? That was the origin of La Paulée de Meursault. So you're at this banquet hall with long tables, 60, 70, 80 people seated together side by side, crammed into a tight space at the table, narrow alleys in between the tables and waiters like pushing their way through. And the festivities begin when people start to get up from the table and start sharing bottles that they've brought to the lunch, bottles that they've brought from their own cellars. So that's the Paulée de Meursault. That's the spirit of it. And that's what really excited me. And at the time, people were already starting to talk about wine in kind of pretentious manners, using language that was hard to relate to. And I just felt that wine should be enjoyed, shared, and you learn through those experiences also. And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to bring the conviviality to the United States.
So the La Paulée de Meursault is traditionally farmers, winemakers, and that sort of thing. And who are the people that come to La Paulée NYC?
So when I started, I invited a handful, about a dozen winemakers from Burgundy. And it was an illustrious group. It was Robert de Vilaine from Romanée-Conti. It was Anne-Claude Leflèvre, Dominique. There were about a dozen. I'm not going to remember everybody's name just now, but there were about a dozen of them. And then I extended the invitation to the clients who had been coming into the restaurant and joined my Burgundy club that I called the Burgundy Club and did wine dinners. And I knew that there was already an interest built in. The tricky part was asking them to come to this dinner in New York and to bring wine from their own cellars to share, because that's the way it's done. That's the Paulée. But it wasn't the way it was done in New York at the time. Right now, BYO is very common. You go to a restaurant, you want to bring your own wine and so on. But people weren't doing that then. So this was the very first, I don't know whether I can say the very first, or one of the very first events, and certainly the first event that launched the idea on a larger scale of bringing your own wine, sharing it with people.
And people are bringing in not just incredibly rare wines, but incredibly expensive wines too. Some of the bottles that the people are bringing to share are like $7,000 bottles. So just so we're clear.
Yeah, keep in mind, in the official first Paulée de New York was 2000, but I had done a few other events prior to that. Keep in mind, back then, the wine wasn't as expensive as it is today, but they were hundreds of dollars, maybe a couple of $1,000s a bottle. Today, yes, people bring bottles of wine that could be more than $10,000 in value.
So not only did it work, not only was it a promotion for Burgundy, how did the restaurant fare from doing this, creating that relationship? It must have been a game changer in terms of stature.
No, we really established through this, maybe before, but through this, we did establish Montrachet as the premier wine destination in New York, if not the United States, especially for Burgundy. We did get the Grand Award, but there were other restaurants that followed us. Cru, Veritas. Montrachet was first in really setting the standard as a restaurant that was known for its wine and fine food. So the restaurant, Drew appreciated it. Daniel Boulou, who cooked at every Paulée, certainly enjoyed it because he's a very convivial person. He enjoyed the spirit of it. He enjoyed the people and the winemakers and the clients.
Was there a first bottle of Burgundy that hit you and made you a Burgundy person?
I don't know. There's so many, but what I can say, it was really my first trip to Burgundy that turned on that light bulb when I went to Burgundy and went into a cellar, and there's the whole sensorial element of it. You go into the cellar, the tactile element of the air, the humidity, the temperature of it around 50 degrees, the smell of the mold on the walls. Now, we're not talking about an unpleasant, moldy smell that you'd find in an attic or something. You're talking about this wonderful expression of the terroir. This is part of the terroir. So you have the smell, you have the feel, the humidity, and then the people and how they would take their glass pipette, it's called a wine thief, I think it's called in English, and dip it into the barrel. And this is a whole ceremony of dipping it in, and it takes a minute for the wine to fill up, and then pulling it out and filling a taste in your glass and taking a moment in silence. Now, the silence, so there's so many elements. There's the hearing, there's the smelling, there's just the sensation on your skin of the air, and there's the tasting. And you taste the wine, and then there's the intangible of just, you could be in any century. I'm in the cellar that was built in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, and someone whose family has been making wine for generations and generations. So it was all that together that hit a nerve in a very strong way with me. It resonated that this is much more than understanding that this wine is made from Pinot Noir or Chardonnay. It was about a whole culture and history and experience. And it hasn't changed to this day, 40 years later. And I still get emotional and I still feel it the same way and that's why I created a scholarship fund. It's we're waiting for the papers for the official 501c3. And it's a scholarship fund. So I can take young sommeliers or wine professionals or people interested in getting into the wine field to Burgundy or Champagne or the Rhone, because I feel like I had that experience. It changed my life. Giving that experience to someone else may change their life.
Neither David or I have visited Burgundy, but once travel has opened up, that's been our first place to hit once everything opens up.
Yeah, no, it's special.
Can you fast forward to 2019 to show what it looked like, your vision 40 years later, in terms of seeing what you accomplished? And also, it's a high ticket price to enter these kind of events. What is that like?
Let me start by saying that the ticket price has creeped up, although the ticket for the main event has stayed constant for quite a few years, but it's still expensive. But over the last maybe 8 to 10 years, we've made a great effort to organize events around the whole Paulée weekend that are very affordable, so we can attract a young demographic, a new generation of people interested in wine who don't have the disposable income for the most expensive events. It's also a good idea to start entry level, get the lay of the land, meet people, develop your palate, learn what you like, what you don't like. Yeah, so we have a lot of events that can range anywhere from $95 per person for a tasting to last year we had a Romani Conti dinner that was $10,500 per person. So there's a wide range. And I really resist, it's hard because it's Burgundy, but I resist being characterized as an elitist event because of the price of Burgundy. But so we make a strong effort to counter that. But Burgundy is expensive. There are some wines, and we do an event called the Off-Grid event. It's to showcase wines from the lesser-known appellations made by great winemakers. And that's a very affordable lunch or tasting. It's important.
I'm sure that a lot of people go and they have built-in friends and the wine is pouring. But if you go in without knowing a lot of people, are you going to find people who are willing to give you their $10,000 pour of their wine or something?
Yes, it is a reciprocal type event. If you go to the table with an old oxidized bottle of Beaujolais Nouveau and say, may I pour you this? And may I have a taste of your Romani Conti 1959? There are all people respond in very different ways. There are a lot of people who say, you clearly are just learning. So yes, we want you to taste this. It's going to introduce you to something magical. And there are other people who are going to say, I just have my small group. But yeah, it's that kind of event where generally there's a huge amount of generosity and sharing. And the room is chaotic in that people are wandering around, sharing, looking for other wines to taste and pouring their wine in exchange. You will not be lost if you go for the first time, if you don't have a great wine. What I encourage people to do, and we have a year for this because this year it's virtual, but next year, hopefully it'll be in person. Contact us. Tell us. We are coming for the first time. We want to meet people. We want to learn about wine. And I do the seating. I say, okay, I'm going to make sure you're at a nice table.
What was the strategy like for doing an all virtual event this year? Obviously, it's something that normally there's a lot of people moving around, shaking hands.
Mind-bending and depressing. For me, I love people. I spent my career in hospitality. I like to be able to, body language in hospitality is very important. And I'm on tech, what is Squadcast? I don't even know what that is. We're not on a Zoom call, but I'm not a tech person. I get by, I figure it out, but I'm very fortunate that I have an all-star team. I have the New York Yankees of event production team. They astonish me, and it allows me to sit on our Zoom meetings every morning and listen to them and try to hide my embarrassment when I say, what are you talking about? Because half the time they're talking about a recording or some kind of tech issue that it's just lost on me. I apologize. So it's been difficult for me emotionally, but we have done it. We have created an event where people all over the world, which is why we called it La Paulée Mondiale this year, people are joining from all over the world. The Consul General of France contacted me last week asking if he would like it if I would like it if he said a few words. So we got his attention, and I said, "Wow, I'm so embarrassed that I didn't invite you." And so he'll be speaking, and we have a number of people on Wednesday night for the opening ceremonies. Winemakers, about 30 of them, maybe half of the winemakers participating this year are going to get out of bed and join us at 11:30 at night in Burgundy to say hello. It's going to be fun. That's the best event of the week. And then that night, we'll do what we call the Rare Wine Dinner, which is really special, Roti Conti with some very old wines, and it's a very expensive dinner. And then Saturday, we have the Grand Tasting, which is the current vintage, like 4 different appellations from this year, 2018 vintage. And then we'll do the gala dinner that night. And then Sunday, there are no consumer events, but sometimes consumers find out where we are and they show up. But I'll take them to hear gospel music or barbecue, or I'll take them to Chinatown, all the winemakers. Or I usually take them on a bike ride around Central Park or Prospect Park or around New York City, so they get a little taste of the city and some fresh air after a long night. And then we get them on a plane, and I unplug my phone and say goodbye.
How is the Meursault Festival changed since you guys started doing New York? Or has it?
It hasn't changed in 90 years.
Wow.
No, mine has changed. Mine continues to evolve, but theirs is a very rural. It's a traditional festival they do every year. Same thing.
Yeah.
What are the competitive events that are like this in New York and around start with New York and then anywhere else?
I'll tell you, it's been interesting. We were the first to do this kind of event. Antonio Galloni contacted me maybe 10 years ago, maybe even more, and said he loves what I do. He loves La Paulée. Would I mind if he did a similar type event modeled after mine for Barolo, Piemonte? And no, I think that's very kind. I'm flattered that you'd like to do that and you like my event. I'm the only one who can do an event like that called like, but I don't know if there are any others. There are others who do. You know what's different about mine? This is the big difference. There's no commercial element. There are some people, importers, and there are some auction houses who do similar type events in Hong Kong, elsewhere, not so much in New York. But then they have an agenda to sell wine afterwards. And what makes mine special is, for the winemakers in any case, they don't feel like they're salespeople. They don't feel commercial. They're there to talk about their wine and share it just like they do in Burgundy. That's what they like to do. So
what I think very fascinating about this year Mondiale is that you can actually buy the packs of tasting, so you can get like all of the Grand Cru Chablis vineyard sites, and there's a seminar that you can taste along with the seminar, which I find is, for a virtual event, absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, that we did this year so we could do that, have the virtual, and we asked all the winemakers. We set up an interview with them, a rendezvous on Zoom with them, so we could interview them on their domain and for them to talk about the wines that are being offered in those packs. So when you buy a pack, you also get a recording of the winemaker talking about each individual wine. And this is one of the innovations that grew out of this situation, is that normally the grand tasting, as I said, it's about 600 people all gathering and going from table to table, maybe 10, 12 people at the table, stretching out their glass for a taste of the wine. Whereas this year, you can take your time. You can taste the wine, you can play the recording, you can replay the recording. You can't ask a question, but then at the grand tasting, it's hard to ask a question anyhow. There's so many people. So that innovation has been really positive.
Do you think you'll continue to do things like that in the following years?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great.
It's a great tool. It enhances the experience, and there are a lot of people who don't like getting in a room with 600 people, especially now. I don't know how long it's going to take for people to get comfortable again. And by the way, March 8th was one of the very last big events in the world last year. So March 8th, today's March 8th. Look at that.
Oh, this is the anniversary. Wow.
Yeah.
So of the 600 people that attend, this is the loyalty question. How many of them are the same people year after year that are so crazed about this?
There are a lot, but there are also, we've made a special category for next gen, a younger demographic, and made special offers to them because we want to get a new generation of younger people in, and people who haven't come every year, because eventually you come 10 years, you say, I can do it differently, or I can go to Burgundy now and do it. I met everybody. So it's really important. We get a lot of new people every year. As much as of that loyalty, it's really important. I appreciate it. It means we're doing a good job, but we need to also renew. So it's good. I'm a little apprehensive. I don't know what's going to come out of this.
And now a quick word from our sponsor, Leo Events. Despite the disruption, the best brands carry on. And for now, the destination is digital. Driven by purpose, platform, and people, let the team at Leo Events deliver impactful, virtual moments for your audience. Visit leoevents.com today to discover Leo's virtual capabilities and read case studies from recent programs.
How do you get the Daniels of the future to have that light bulb go off about wine? And I took a SOM course actually with Christian over the pandemic and got a huge appreciation of understanding the geography, all the essence of how incredibly interesting this is. But how is it happening today? How do people jump into the swim here?
Yes, unfortunately, the times have changed a lot since I started. Now, I first went to Burgundy in 1982. Okay, so what is that, 40 years, 39 years, right? That's a long time. And the Burgundy has changed a lot since, and the world of wine has changed a lot, and our habits. And I'm fortunate because I had access. It was very easy to get into the cellars then, and then because I established the relationships, I can continue to go back. So it's hard for young people or anybody to have that experience that I had. And that's why I created the scholarship, is so I can take them, or one of my colleagues can take them, and get into those cellars and hopefully have that experience. But you're right. Most people today, they're taking a course online, or they're joining the WSET, or one of the organizations that's educating people. But you're getting the education, which is great. But you're not getting deep inside the culture. When you sit in a living room or even in the cellar with one of the legends of Burgundy and hear them talk about their vineyard, and you're tasting the wine in the barrel, you can't replace that with anything.
Is that just craftsmanship in general? We're actually much more attuned to wanting to understand everything that's in part of our lives. We want to go to great restaurants. We want to go to have the best decor in our houses and our apartments to make sure the quality level is up. There's certainly like an appreciation for finer things lately, and it seems to have been evolving over years. In America at least. Do you agree with that?
I definitely think so, especially as it relates to wine. I've noticed, you used to go into a restaurant and ask for a glass of Chablis, and what people meant when they said that was any white wine. They weren't asking for Chablis. They were just asking for something light in color and cold, ice cold.
I remember blush with Burgundy being at a tasting menu restaurant and having all sorts of different wine pairings. And then the sommelier, who's a friend of mine, pulled out a 98 Bonneau de Martre Corton Charlemagne. Just was like, whatever this is, however expensive this is, I just want to drink more of it and learn everything about it. And that was it.
Yeah, but it goes hand in hand with what's happening today. Is that, and I have this conversation with Danielle all the time, is that wine plays a very different role on the table and the dining experience today than it did when he started his career, when I started my career, and even 15, maybe 20 years ago. Consumers are very sophisticated now. They want the finer things. They want fine wine. They know about wine, and they insist on having good wine and wine at a fair price. It doesn't mean inexpensive. It means a fair price.
Yeah, and people want to learn too.
They want to learn.
Want a story.
They don't want to be taken advantage of.
This brings up an interesting point, though. In the whole general event, we're very involved in the event industry. As wine and spirits are the highest profitability aspect of the entire business. Yeah. And I'm interested to know the impact of the people that are ordering the wines. Our event organizers are probably the largest purchasers just by knowing that they're buying for 1,000 people at a pop. How do they know what to buy for their large audiences? And how do we keep wine as important as ever as part of the mix on the table at an event as well as on the table at a restaurant? It's an unanswerable question, by the way.
Yeah, I think that it's about knowing your audience. You have to know your audience, and you have to know your subject. And if you pair it up, and I have to say that I've never tried to do a mass market type of event. I always focus on the niche because there are always people who are drawn to, I don't know, Chablis or Cordon Charlemagne, but if I did Chardonnay of the world, yeah, you'll get people. But to me, that's not really interesting unless you're saying, lining them up. Oh, here's an Australian, here's a Californian, here's a Burgundy, and it's a seminar, and you're talking why are they different, how are they different? That's one thing. But as for events, I like to be really focused on what it is and also present it in a very keeping hospitality in mind and doing it at the highest level I know how to, whether it be with the food or the service or the glassware, all the elements that go into making it a fine event. So often you've been to tastings and you get like a clunky glass, or you go and it's a meal and they didn't pay any attention to the food. Daniel Boulou, Michel Toigreau, Thomas Keller, David Kinch, 3 Michelin star restaurants from all over the United States and France. I invite and spend tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars on them because I think that's what makes the event special.
Can I summarize what I think you're saying? If I was sitting out here listening to what you're saying, it's that the wine, like everything else, has to tell the story, a story.
Yeah.
And it appears as though if you're not thinking of it that way, you're missing a lot of elements of an event to make them special. So that when you choose, maybe you should choose more wisely that your wines tell a story and fits with everything else. So is that correct? Am I getting there a little bit?
Yes, and tied into that is the wines I choose and the winemakers I invite are very carefully chosen because there has to be, it's like a feng shui thing. There has to be like a connection between the winemakers. They have to go back to France, to their homes, happy about the event. I always say every element is important. The guests, the chefs, the sommeliers, everything's important. But what's most important, the winemakers who are coming, am I taking care of them? Are they going home happy? Are they going to go home and market our event for us by saying how great it was? Are they going to remember it? Are they going to want to come back? So that's very important. A lot of winemakers write me and say, how much does it cost to subscribe and be invited to the Paulée? And I write back as nicely as possible and say, it's not the kind of event you pay for to come to. I don't want your money. I invite you. You're the guest in my home. And you hear of a friend having a fancy dinner party, and you're not invited. Your feelings may be hurt, but you're not going to call or write him or her and say, can I come? You just don't do that.
What is the thing that makes you decide on what the theme is or what the story is or who should be invited?
There's a lot of gut instinct, but I'm also thinking I don't want only the most exclusive domains. I do want the most exclusive domains, but I also want to introduce new wines to people. I want people to feel like they're learning something, they're discovering. I want them to discover a new, what's that? Hey.
Yeah, Christian is
okay. No, I want people to come, and I feel like we have a role to play also, that we're not just a billboard for the most famous, but we're also on the cutting edge. We have our ear to the ground, and we're saying, you may not have heard of this producer in Chambon-Musigny, but you should. So we'll invite that person who maybe the daughter or son just started making wine at the domain is taking over and making better wine than their parents. I'll say, you may know this domain from the past. Maybe it was just, I won't say it was just okay, but it wasn't like superstar level. Pay attention. So I really put a lot into that as well.
So who are some of those folks in this year?
Oh, wow. I'd have to look at the guests.
You have Ben LaRue, don't you?
Oh, Ben LaRue. Yeah, he's under the radar. He's pretty well known, but he's a little bit under the radar. He's definitely a
Screw caps.
Upper tier. Yeah. There's a young guy in Volnay, Thibaut Clerget, who's making really good wine. Emily Berthaud, who's making Fissin, but she has some Echezot, some fancy appellations as well. The young woman, there are a lot of women taking over their domains, like Léa Lafont, who's now stepping into the role of director at Domaine Comte Lafont. So there's always a little like tension when there's a transition like that. And I feel like it's our role to assure people that, okay, this domain has a new winemaker, a new generation. And I think it's always very easy for people to say, oh, it's not like it used to be. Well, maybe not, but maybe it's better. Or maybe it's not, maybe you're judging too quickly. So I just think that's part of what we do and what we have to do.
How do you know this now? How are you getting this input? Are you traveling a lot there, or were you?
I was traveling a lot. I hadn't been back to France in a year. In January, I was able to get authorization papers from the French consulate that let me into the country with a small team, Raj and Edouard. And we were there filming and interviewing, tasting and cellars. And it's all going to come out next week on the festival. So I hadn't been there, and I really felt out of touch. Yeah, with the people in the vintage 18 and 19 and 20. There's a lot of catch up to do. I have to go back.
Why don't we, I know we're getting close to this end here. Do you want to give us your final thoughts on amazing that as an event organizer, you're an event organizer, you're a wine expert, you're in all those different areas. What about it that you're so appreciative over the years that you feel like you've accomplished in this endeavor?
Boy, you didn't send me that question ahead of time.
I know this is completely just because you're getting me so emotionally involved in what you're saying that I want to hear what you really thought about.
Well, I feel like when I first went into the Paulée de New and was touched by the spirit of the event, and this caused me to want to do that in New York, I feel like it's a different event. It could never be the same event, but I feel like I have been able to bring people together and enable them to enjoy wine in this fashion. And I do feel good about that. I hadn't really given it a lot of thought, but I think I've been able to accomplish that. And now the challenge is going to be, how do we keep doing that? And how do we keep making it interesting and drawing new people into it to understand that wine is not just all those descriptors, that there's so much more. I always talk about it as like a canvas. And when you know something about art or music, opera or something, and the libretto and the artist, and you know what the symbolism is on the painting, it's so much richer. And so with wine, I don't want people just to know how many hectares and what the maceration period was and all this. I want them to understand, get inside that winemaker's head. Why are they very like precise? You go in the winery, you see how clean it is, and you see the person, how precise, and taste the wine, how clean and precise they are. There's just so much more to it. Wine it's a beverage we drink at dinner. It's like salt and pepper, but it's so much deeper, and it opens so many more doors and windows and adds so much more interest to the experience. That's what I want to do. I want to continue to do that.
That's great.
Yep. That sounds great. And I'm hoping that your comments today will make our event organizers who buy wine by the case make their decisions much more prudently and think about it as a storytelling device and have much higher quality in the way they think of this experience. Because I think events are going to be more important than ever, that they have purpose, because people do not want to go just for the sake of going anymore.
Yeah, that's very well stated. I really, and that's what I do when I do a staff training or something about a wine. I try to tell them a story about the wine, the winemaker, or something, and something funny happened, so that they have something more to relate to whoever they're in turn selling it to.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter @GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on.